Hello, guys, gals, fellow friends, and fishermen. Mike McFarland here. Going to give you a rundown for Lake Fork, October 6th, 2021. All right, let's go right to the board and not mess around. Let's talk about levels, lake levels first. We had a little bit of rain last week that brought it up about 1 inch. But as of Monday, or really as of Sunday, we've been back on the fall. So from Monday 401.21 to today 401.15 is really only about a half an inch. Things are cooling down. The cool trend is huge, and really that's typical for this time of year till we start having some good rains. The cool trend is really big. We're in the upper 70s right now. Anywhere from 77 to 81 is what I'm seeing the lake be, and cooling even faster because the cool time is at night. First thing to realize is that cool water, or water itself, as it gets cold, gets heavy. So it sinks through the water column. So a lake will cool down much faster than it will heat up. So our cool trends are happening really fast, which instigates or begins that fall turnover. Really, it's not the actual turnover, the two temperatures, but it breaks the thermocline and it allows all that debris and methane gases, and it blends, and it's blended water, and it's mixed. It's a mess. Oxygen levels get messed up. We're kind of beyond that in most of the lake. That's why you're seeing here 0 to 3 foot visibility. I should put a little star here because I want you to pay close attention. There are parts of the lake that this is not the case. And if you're in those parts, you need to move and get out. If you're seeing yellow bubbles and nasty floating debris and methane gases on the surface, and the water looks kind of rusty, not tannicky. Tannic water, whiskey water is good fishing water, but it's got a orange juicy, rusty, it just doesn't look good. Get out of there. And the reason why is there is better water to find. Okay, I'm finding good water, 0 to 3 foot of visibility. I'm generally halfway back, 2/3 of the way back in creeks, major creeks, and I'm more up north. So I'm not telling you to run up north. That's not the answer. But just like we warm trend in the spring from the north end to the mid lake to the basin, the more south you tend to go in the basin is where you're going to see the turnover still happening. The reason being deeper water takes longer for that to penetrate at nighttime, cool trending, and more water to cool. So in other words, the north end is turned over, the mid lake turns over later than, and the south end is usually the finishing of it all. Okay, the bottom line is if we have winds, turns the lake, blends the lake, and or rain and fresh water, which we did get, that can usually counterbalance the turnover pretty quick. Second, moreover than that, everything is so behind because of the snow and ice. The shad spawn was later. The bass spawn was 1 or 2 months later. So for example, when the fry right now is smaller than it's supposed to be, the shad should be the size of my thumbnail, inch and a quarter, inch and a half. They're the size of my pinky fingernail. This is making challenges to get bit. The bass are where they're supposed to be. The bait is where it's supposed to be, and there's tons of it. But it's so small that we can't match that. So smaller baits right now are the way to catch the fish. Super duper shallow because we have kind of in essence turned over and are turning over depending on where you are on the lake. I'm fishing less than 5 feet of water. I can find deep fish on the sonar, but man, they're not happy. They don't eat. It's really difficult, at least for me and the other guides that I'm around. There's not a deep bite per se. So in essence, again, not just necessarily north, get yourself halfway back in the creeks, look for some fresher water, look for the bait itself. Okay, you'll see it flickering, you can see it on your side scan, you can see it on your down scan, you can tell when you're in the thickness of it, and you'll see fish from time to time blowing up on it. I'm really just going to kind of keep it simple and give you my 3 best baits right now that are the most effective, the best approach to do so, and a little explanation of what you need to do to make these produce. So The first thing again is really watch the birds, as I always teach. Where the blue herons are, where the white egrets are, the bait fish are. You need to get in those areas and slow down. And even if once the bird flies off because you showed up there, that's fine. The bird doesn't have to stay there. The bird showed you that there's food there. And remember this, that bird's on the shoreline. That bait is in front of the bird. The bait's not just going to conveniently go up to the bird and let the bird eat it. So what's happening in this equation is that generally where the bird is, he's watching the bait. And on the other side in the water, the bass are also watching that bait and at times hitting that bait, which drives that bait up on the shoreline, and the blue heron gets the food. This all works together. So the birds are the most important thing right now. The best thing you could do is even just take yourself a little Sunday cruise and watch where the birds are. It'll give you a great idea of where to spend your time fishing. Okay, a little bit ago, maybe a week or two ago, I talked about junk fishing. It still is that time. If I was coming to Lake Fork and I just wanted one big giant fish right now, I probably would not junk fish. I would tie on a bigger bait, a buzz bait or a larger swim bait, and try and just cover hundreds and hundreds of yards of shoreline, casting at every target I could, every dock corner, every stump, every grass edge. Might probably throw a buzz frog in along with that buzz bait, and or a big spinner bait. I love spinner bait. But you know, a lot of times you just come in this time of year, you should be able to run into some fish, and you got to do the same thing right now. You have to just put the trolling motor down and go, and hit where you've seen all those birds, and hit those spots only. And once you find a bite or two, know that there's more there. So put them power poles down and stay. We got one bite in a little area the other day, put the power poles down and took 6 more fish off of 2 stumps. And so when the oxygen levels are low because of this turnover that we just discussed and the bad levels of methane gases and everything, it drives everything to the surface. Okay, it was all offshore in the trees. The turnover happens. It all rises to the surface. And if you watch your sonars right now, you'll see the bait. Everything's at 5-6 feet. You can be out in the middle of the lake, over 50 feet of water, and it's all up on the top of the sonar. All right, and it's all going to go to the shorelines. The shorelines are where you're going to catch it. So keep that in mind. All right. Now, there are schooling fish offshore. With all that bait offshore, you got all those deep trees. There's a lot of offshore spots there that can hold fish. The tops of the trees that reach the surface are holding fish. If you remember Patrick Walters last year, the suspending bass in the trees, now's that time. You're going to see tons of fish suspending in the tops of bushes, brush, and trees, especially in the shallow water. The tree could be in 30 feet of water, but the bass is in the top of the tree in the first 5 feet. Okay? That makes it very tricky to find. So here's some baits. If you're just running bank and you're running the birds, like I suggested, you're generally going to find the birds and things on some do-nothing banks. There's usually a little bit of what we call pondweed grass in front of it. That grass is why they're there. The grass is holding the bait. It's almost just like a piece of kelp floating out in the ocean. One piece of kelp floating out in the middle of nowhere in the ocean holds the bait. The bait relates to the kelp, and the big predators come to eat the bait. So just remember that. If you're running bank, my 2 best baits right now, realistically, are the underspin, and or a really small spinner bait like the Got 5 spinner bait. But here's the key. Right now, I'm actually running 2 underspins. I forgot to put the other one out, so I'm going to just talk to you about it. This is a weedless owner underspin. If I'm around lots of vegetation, grass of any kind, whether it or lily pads, it could be the duckweed, the eelgrass, it could be the pondweed, it could be some alligator grass. But if I'm in any good vegetation, I'm going to go ahead and throw the weedless version of the underspin. All right. If I'm not, I'm actually using the headed version, the lead-headed version. It's not weedless. But the reason is there's 2 different presentations with this bait. This version tends to have a lot more rock, okay? Whereas the lead-headed version is going to be more streamlined. And one thing I'm noticing right now is that the bait's so small that the water displacement is critical. I can't reel this slow enough, by the way. I mean slow rolling it in 1 foot of water, 2 foot of water. what I'm finding is I'm able to go to the revenge type style head, or the sand tone type head, or Sixth Sense head, but the jigged head, the lead headed type, which is non-weedless. I think they do make a type of weedless version of that. Usually doesn't work that well. But in the open water around this grass, at the stumps, at the docks, I'm able to give them a faster presentation, and it doesn't have such a rocking action. And here's my theory. The bait that I just discussed a little bit ago is so small that the water displacement from it isn't much. When you have a paddle tail bait, it's going to put a lot of water displacement. And so the less water displacement, the more streamlined the bait right now, the more bites I am finding. Okay, let's move on. My second best bait is, as always this time of year, I love a little purple worm. It could be black grape, it could be purple. Realistically, blue fleck, electric grape, electric blue, just some reason that family of worms is awesome. Now with the Berkeley coming here pretty soon, there's a lot of Berkeley worms that will work. This is a cutter worm, Strike King cutter worm. I use a really light 1/8 ounce tungsten or quarter max, smaller hook. I really want a light presentation, and I'm flipping this, pitching and flipping this all around, really no flipping. We discussed that before. I'm pitching this at docks, at targets, at brush, I'm also fishing in brush piles, 10 to 12 feet of water, only where there's clarity, non-turned over water, and of course I find fish on the sonar. Okay, those two baits alone are really the main gist of what I'm catching fish on. And so my recommendation to you, those are confident baits for me, so stay with it. If I was to break 20 rods out right now and go through 15 minutes of this and try this all day long, I feel like I wouldn't get the bites as when I take something like that and just apply it. And remember, when I'm covering lots of water, when I get a bite, put the hard poles down and stay for 20 more minutes. 15, 20 more minutes, rule of thumb. Every time you catch a fish, buys you another 10 minutes, okay? So run and gun, get a bite, power pole down, slow down. Try and comb that area out within a 20-yard area, catch them all. I'm going to move on to it again. Okay, another great bait to keep on the deck of the boat. It is topwater season. Because the bait fish are so small, I've gotten away from like the walking baits, and until I find some bigger bait, I've downsized. I've gone to a small plopper, small Whopper Plopper, and I'm putting, the color on it is clear. The color is a little greenback, clear sparkles, and this is emulating that little tiny fingernail bait. Okay, that bait casts a country mile. I'm throwing that, by the way, on 20-pound monofilament. My real-time rods that Louis built for me is ideal for this. The CB 7'10", 1530. Okay, long rod, long casting with that 20-pound Mason bass on line. Man, I can throw this as far as you can throw a little lead spoon. It really is awesome. I think that the Tatula reel has a lot to do with that too. The special TW guide deal that really lets that line be free. But man, this thing is long casting, and you're going to be fishing and all of a sudden have something blow up around you. Pick this thing up, bomb it to it, and you'll be surprised at what you may catch. Those are offshore schooling fish. It's real random, and I haven't found a pattern to it, or I'd tell you there was. Sometimes a pattern would be a long point, and they keep corralling the bait and blowing up on the point. It happens again and again and again. This is offshore, open water, random. It's like being in the ocean or being at Tawakoni chasing the stripers. It's just random, okay? So that's the gist of the baits that I'm really going to have every day on my deck for the next few more days. As Berkeley comes next week, I'm going to swap into a lot more Berkeley stuff. This Sunday, look for a Berkeley rendition of a rundown, giving you guys an opportunity. I'm going to focus on Berkeley baits only, but I'm going to do a rundown this Sunday for the Berkeley event that's coming in another 10 days here. We have Berkeley only baits, and I got some cool tricks to tell you about in that. All right. One last thing. If you are an offshore kind of guy and you like to spend that time looking, it's a needle in a haystack. But if you spend enough time looking, you can find the right tree in about 10 to 18 feet of water holding the big bass. It's suspending in that tree. You can throw a lot of things at them. Patrick Walters was throwing the jerkbait at them. Square bill crankbaits, shallow square bill crankbaits are a really good way. Slow roll, a lot of different things by them. I still am backing up to what I do in the summer when I find those kind of fish. I'm not looking for the bigger ones, but I'm going to the Texas Rig Magnum Trickworm. And basically the watermelon candy again, chartreuse tail. That will successfully get some bites from those suspending bigger bass. You're going to find some isolated ones where there's just one bass in the tree. When you see more than one bass in the tree, is usually not the real giant ones. Okay, so that's it. Remember, look for the Berkeley rendition on Sunday. I hope this helps some of you guys. I'm catching everything less than 5 feet of water, and a lot of the shoreline is just do nothing dirt. All right, it's crazy, but that's it. If you like this, give me the thumbs up. If you've already hit the subscribe, thank you so much. If you have not, please hit the subscribe button below. There's a whole bunch of cool things coming this fall. Gonna do some actual videos of me fishing. I've got some really neat things to introduce to you around Christmas time for 2022. All right, everything's in place for the year. Brand new boats lined out. We are rocking already. So awesome to be here. Thanks again. Appreciate you watching. I'm Mike McFarland, the Lake Fork Guide.